What looked like a dazzling $32 million royal fairy tale was, in this telling, already showing signs of trouble long before the Oprah interview and long before the Spotify fallout. Even in the wedding build-up, moments were surfacing that critics now point to as early warning signs. The polished image was there for the cameras, but underneath it, a very different story was allegedly taking shape around Meghan Markle and the public identity she worked so hard to build. At the center of that argument is Tom Bower, the veteran biographer whose reporting has stirred strong reactions in royal circles for years. His case does not rely on one explosive claim alone. Instead, he pieces together accounts from former staff, royal insiders, and people from elite social circles to argue that Meghan's public image was far more calculated than the innocent version she later presented. In his view, this was never the story of a woman who wandered blindly into palace life. It was the story of someone who knew the power of image and used it hard. For years, Meghan framed herself as the reluctant royal, the American outsider who stepped into a rigid institution without fully understanding the rules. She later told Oprah, "I didn't know much about the royal family. I didn't Google Harry." That line became one of the strongest pillars of her public story. But Bower challenges it directly. He claims Meghan's path toward Harry was not random and not as innocent as it sounded. According to his account, her so-called move toward a royal future began as early as 2013, after the end of her marriage to Trevor Engelson. Bower argues that Meghan did not simply meet a prince by chance. He says she actively studied Harry's world, his emotional wounds, his connection to Africa, and his public image as the troubled but compassionate royal. So when that blind date in Soho finally happened, Bower frames it not as luck, but as preparation meeting opportunity. In his telling, Meghan presented herself as the exact kind of woman Harry would be drawn to, and that impression landed fast. That is why Bower sees the innocence narrative as performance rather than truth. He points to Meghan's earlier social media presence and her interest in status circles as signs that she was already fascinated by British high society long before Harry entered the picture. In this version, the humanitarian soulmate image was not accidental. It was strategic, polished, and effective. To Bower, that may have been the most powerful role she ever played. Then came the 2018 wedding, presented to the world as a glowing symbol of unity, modernity, and royal renewal. But behind the palace walls, Bower and other commentators describe something much messier. What viewers saw was a grand ceremony full of pageantry. What critics say was happening off-camera was tension, ego, pressure, and a growing pattern of conflict over details that carried bigger meaning than they first appeared to. One of the most discussed details is Meghan's arrival at St. George's Chapel in a Rolls-Royce Phantom 4 on May 19, 2018. This was not just a glamorous car. It was one of the rarest vehicles in the royal collection, and writers have noted its association with Wallis Simpson, the American divorcee tied forever to one of the monarchy's biggest historical crises. That is why some insiders did not treat the choice as meaningless. Bower presents it as a symbolic move, a message that Meghan was not entering the system quietly or humbly. Another claim that caused outrage involved St. George's Chapel itself. Reports discussed by royal writers, including Robert Jobson, say Meghan complained about the smell inside the historic chapel and wanted air fresheners or atomizers used before guests arrived. Staff reportedly pushed back because of the chapel's age, importance, and sacred status. According to those accounts, that refusal led to anger and left a strong impression on those handling the event behind the scenes. To Bower, that moment mattered because it showed a clash of values. He argues that Meghan approached royal heritage like a set that needed adjusting to fit her preferred image. Her critics saw that as disrespectful rather than practical. Instead of adapting herself to the setting, they say she wanted the setting adapted to her. For staff already dealing with heavy pressure, stories like this only added to the sense that the wedding was becoming a minefield. Her decision to walk the first stretch of the aisle alone added even more debate. Supporters praised it as bold and modern. Critics saw it as another highly managed image choice designed to keep the spotlight fixed on her. By the time then Prince Charles joined her, the visual story had already been set. In Bower's framing, Meghan was not simply taking part in the ceremony, she was shaping it around herself in every way she could. The backyard wedding claim from the Oprah interview became even more damaging to her credibility. Meghan said she and Harry had been married privately by the Archbishop of Canterbury 3 days before the public event. But the Archbishop later clarified that the only legal wedding took place on Saturday, May 19th. After that, the Sussexes shifted the wording and described the earlier moment as a private exchange of vows. That backtracking gave critics a major opening. Bower argues that this was not just a minor mistake. He says it showed Meghan's need to reshape the story so that the giant public wedding looked like something imposed on her, while the real marriage appeared simple and intimate. That framing helped support her victim narrative. But to critics, it clashed with reports that Meghan wanted the ceremony to be lavish, visually perfect, and globally unforgettable. That contradiction is still one of the sharpest points in the whole debate. Another turning point came during a shooting weekend at Sandringham in 2017, when Harry introduced Meghan to some of his oldest friends. According to Bower's sources, the weekend went badly. Meghan reportedly challenged the group's jokes and attitudes with such intensity that the atmosphere became tense and uncomfortable. By the end of it, several of Harry's longtime friends were said to be deeply doubtful about her. Their concerns, according to Bower, were not handled as warning signs. Instead, Harry moved further toward Meghan and further away from people who had known him for years. Some of those old friends were later left out of key wedding moments. In Bower's telling, this was part of a broader pattern where Meghan helped Harry recast his own circle as toxic, cutting him off from the people who once grounded him. The Thomas Markle fallout became another major piece of the picture. Public attention focused on his staged paparazzi photos, but Bower argues there was more behind the estrangement. He claims Meghan saw her father as a liability to the polished image she wanted for the wedding. Reports even say then Prince Charles urged her to reconcile with Thomas and stop the growing embarrassment, but she refused. In that version of events, the issue was not just family pain. It was image control. The bridesmaid dress dispute also remained a lasting source of damage. Meghan later said Catherine upset her, but Bower's reporting says the opposite, citing accounts from people allegedly present. The clash reportedly involved Princess Charlotte's dress and questions around formal protocol. To Bower, this was never just about tailoring, it was another power struggle. Another sign of Meghan refusing to bend where Catherine had spent years learning how the system worked. That same mood surrounded the tiara argument and Harry's reported line, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." To critics, that phrase captured the mindset forming around the couple. Every disagreement was starting to look like a battle, every palace rule like an attack, and every objection like proof that the institution was against them. Staff reportedly felt the pressure of it all and learned to keep their distance whenever possible. Bower's harshest claim is that Meghan encouraged Harry to see her through the emotional lens of Princess Diana, presenting herself as hunted, misunderstood, and crushed by the press. He argues that this tapped directly into Harry's deepest trauma. Diana's place in public memory was built over years of visible service and suffering. Meghan's critics believe she tried to borrow that emotional weight far too quickly, using symbols, storytelling, and image to place herself in a role the public was never ready to grant her. That is why the wedding still matters so much in this story. To millions, it was a national celebration full of hope, glamour, and history. But to Bower, and those who agree with him, it was also the moment the gap between image and reality started to become impossible to ignore, and that is what keeps the debate alive even now, as more people focus on the stunning contrast between the immense cost of that royal spectacle and Meghan's later disdain for. That backlash left a credibility gap that still has not closed, and one of the biggest pressure points was money. Tom Bower argues that Meghan was especially effective at blurring the facts around the royal wedding costs. turning a complex funding structure into a simpler, more emotional story that worked in her favor. In that version, the wedding became something the public had paid for and something she was forced to carry, which helped stir resentment against the monarchy while casting her as a trapped figure inside it all. The actual breakdown was far less dramatic than that framing suggested. The total cost of the wedding was said to be around £32 million, but most of that figure was tied to security, not flowers, gowns, or private royal luxuries. Under the usual arrangement for a major royal event, the family covered the church service, decorations, and receptions from private funds, while the state covered security because the event was treated as a national occasion. Bower's point is that Meghan allegedly flattened those details on purpose, so the story sounded harsher, simpler, and more useful to her public image. That matters because once those lines were blurred, the whole wedding could be reframed as proof that she had been used by the institution. By suggesting the public had effectively paid for her wedding, Meghan could position herself as a woman put on display for a system that claimed ownership over her. But her critics say that picture skips a key fact. She also enjoyed one of the most protected, luxurious, and high-profile entries into royal life imaginable. In their eyes, she accepted the full benefit of the machine while quietly preparing the ground for later complaints about it. That is why her Oprah comments hit such a nerve. When Meghan looked back at St. George's Chapel and described the public ceremony like a kind of hollow show, saying she and Harry had wanted something just for us, many people saw that as more than personal reflection. To critics, it felt like a dismissal of the millions who had watched, celebrated, bought souvenirs, and treated the day as a real national moment. Bower uses that reaction as further proof of what he sees as Meghan's deeper motive. She embraced the grandeur when it elevated her, then downgraded it once it no longer served her story. What makes that criticism harder to shake is the evidence that she was deeply involved in shaping the event itself. Archived reports and coverage from 2018 showed Meghan taking a strong interest in the details, the styling, the optics, and the presentation. That is why her critics reject the idea that she simply endured the spectacle. In their view, she did not just stand inside it, she helped design it, and once the moment had delivered the global attention it needed to deliver, they say she began recasting it as something imposed on her rather than something she actively wanted. The same pattern appears in the fallout over the "who made who cry" dispute. Meghan's claim that Catherine upset her over the bridesmaid dress issue became one of the most repeated and emotionally effective lines from the Oprah interview, but Bower, relying on staff accounts, argues that the story went the other way. In that version, Catherine raised concerns about Charlotte's dress and formal protocol, including the issue of tights, and Meghan reportedly brushed those concerns aside in a way that felt cold and dismissive. That clash then became something much bigger than a tailoring problem. To Bower, the real power of that story was not the disagreement itself, but the way it was retold later. By reversing the narrative publicly, Meghan could cast Catherine as the aggressor while placing herself in the familiar role of the wounded outsider. And because Catherine was bound by royal restraint and would never publicly debate the details, Meghan's version had room to spread without immediate correction. Critics see that as one of the smartest moves in her media playbook because it hit a future queen where she was least able to answer back. By March 2026, according to this telling, that whole carefully built story was starting to come apart under renewed scrutiny. Bower's continued releases and commentary reportedly left Meghan furious, especially because the new pushback was not coming from nameless online chatter alone. It was coming from witness accounts, royal records, press archives, and details that could be matched against public facts. Every challenged claim, every disputed anecdote, and every corrected timeline added more strain to the image she had built between 2018 and 2021. What may be bothering her even more, at least in this narrative, is the lack of reaction from London. The monarchy, under the version described here, has chosen detachment over direct combat. There are no emotional public replies, no dramatic palace denials, and no visible scrambling. Instead, The royal household has supposedly taken the view that Harry and Meghan are no longer central players in the institution at all. They are treated more like overseas public figures than constitutional threats, and that shift alone changes the balance of power in a big way. That recategorization hits hard because it also affects status and money. If Meghan is no longer viewed as a compelling royal insider, but as a celebrity figure with a disputed track record, then every new project becomes harder to sell. Bauer argues that this is where the damage becomes practical. It is no longer only about reputation or headlines. It becomes about contracts, trust, and commercial value. If her claims about the most famous royal family in the world can be challenged line by line, then potential partners may start wondering what exactly they are buying. That fear reportedly reaches into Hollywood too. The same elite names who filled seats at the wedding have not exactly formed a loud support wall in the years since. The dream once sold in 2020 was huge. A new Sussex empire built on global impact, premium storytelling, major production deals, podcasts, documentaries, and prestige projects. But by March 2026, critics say that promise had faded badly. The glow was weaker, the buzz was thinner, and the whole brand looked less like a rising force and more like a stalled operation searching for its next angle. The Netflix deal remains the clearest example of that shift. On paper, it was historic, reportedly worth around $100 million and packed with possibility. But industry talk cited by Bauer paints a less impressive picture behind the scenes. The Harry and Meghan documentary drew major attention, yes, but it leaned heavily on royal conflict, family pain, and grievance. That kind of material can create a spike, but it is hard to stretch into a long-term creative empire. Once that first emotional currency was spent, the pipeline looked shakier. That is where the collapse of other projects started to matter more. The animated series Pearl was scrapped, and the broader output failed to match the size of the original hype. Bauer's argument is that Meghan's brand became too reactive and too centered on image management rather than real creative depth. In his view, she was not building a strong body of work. She was curating herself, and once the public began to tire of the victim framing, the brand looked thinner than expected, with not enough substance underneath the gloss. The Spotify mess only made that worse. By 2026, the remark from a top executive calling Harry and Meghan grifters was still hanging over their reputation in the industry. Even years later, that label kept echoing because it fed an already growing belief that the Sussex brand overpromised and underdelivered. In this harsher reading, Meghan was no longer seen as a major storyteller or powerful producer. She was seen as someone with strong headlines, expensive deals, and uneven follow-through. That gap is the kind Hollywood does not forgive easily. Bauer's most explosive theory goes even further and turns toward Meghan's long-term motives. He suggests that her loyalty has often followed usefulness, not emotional bond. To support that, he points to the pattern he believes he sees in her life. She moved on from Trevor Engelson as her career changed, pulled away from her father when he became inconvenient, and left royal duty behind when it limited her freedom to build her own brand. In that reading, each relationship had value for a season, and once that value changed, the relationship changed too. That theory fuels another round of rumors, especially those claiming Meghan has been networking quietly in richer and more powerful circles. Bauer suggests she may be looking toward tech money, billionaire influence, and connections that could offer more reach than Harry can now provide. The idea is blunt and ruthless. If Harry is no longer a useful bridge back into royal relevance, then the next move would be toward a different kind of empire altogether. Whether true or not, that theory says a lot about how sharply her critics now view her intentions. Inside Montecito, this version of events paints a tense picture. Reports describe a mood of alarm, with Meghan allegedly frustrated that her older story is being picked apart by former staff, old records, and details she cannot easily control. Her critics say she remains intensely focused on online image, media framing, and digital reputation, but that these efforts are starting to backfire. Every indirect rebuttal, every planted defense, and every quiet response only throws more light on the very issues she would rather bury. And that may be the cruelest twist of all. The more she tries to regain control, the more her critics say she confirms the image of someone obsessed with control in the first place. While that cycle keeps spinning in California, London looks calmer by comparison. In this telling, the monarchy has settled into a steadier, more service-driven rhythm, and the palace no longer sees any reason to wrestle publicly with Meghan's version of events. They have stopped treating her as a direct threat, and in doing that, they have made their strongest move of all. They are no longer part of her spectacle. By 2026, Harry no longer looks like the untouchable royal he once was. In this version of the story, he comes across as a man pulled far away from the life that once gave him purpose, status, and protection. Without the firm around him, and without the steady support of his brother, he is painted as a tragic figure. A prince who walked away from everything for a future that never fully paid off. And for Meghan, the biggest consequence in 2026 is not legal. It is social. The Hollywood A-listers who once filled St. George's Chapel are no longer rushing to stand beside her. The same stars who helped make that wedding look even bigger now seem to be keeping a careful distance. In this telling, nobody wants to get dragged into the fallout of a long-running clash between a duchess and a monarchy. Once trust starts slipping, celebrity power slips with it too. That is why Tom Bower's later claims hit harder than the old wedding drama. The story moves away from dresses and tiaras and into something much darker. A world of old connections, elite circles, silence, and leverage. In royal battles, secrets carry weight, and silence can carry just as much. By March 2026, Bower is presented as digging into older networks tied to influence, money, and scandal. That turns this from simple palace tension into a fight over what people knew, what they kept quiet, and why. One of the most explosive parts of that argument centers on Meghan's pre-royal social life and her links to Soho House. Bower presents that scene as more than a stylish social club. In his version, it was part of a bigger web where royals, celebrities, insiders, and power players crossed paths all the time. Through those circles, he suggests Meghan moved near figures connected to Prince Andrew's wider orbit. Once those old links are dragged back into the light, every silence starts to look heavy. The story pushes that angle further with the claim that lawyers tied to Virginia Giuffre allegedly considered Meghan as a possible witness in Prince Andrew's civil case. The reason, according to this version, was the belief that Meghan may have known details about Andrew's social world and some of the people around him. Whether that ever came close or not, Bower uses it to raise a bigger point. Harry and Meghan publicly criticised several royals, yet stayed strangely quiet about Andrew. In his reading, that silence is not random. It looks like a cold standoff where nobody wants to say too much because too much may already be known. Then there is the tiara clash, often treated like a simple wedding tantrum, but framed here as the first serious power struggle between Meghan and Queen Elizabeth II. Meghan reportedly wanted the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik, a tiara surrounded by history and questions about its provenance. When Angela Kelly said it would not be available, the moment allegedly turned tense fast. In Bower's telling, this was never really about jewellery. It was about Meghan hitting the hard wall of royal hierarchy and realising there was one person she could not push past. That is why the Queen's reported response matters so much in this version. The line that Meghan would not get whatever she wanted and would wear the tiara she was given is treated like a brutal royal reality check. Bower argues this was the moment Meghan realised she could not bend the monarchy through charm, pressure, or Harry's backing. In his interpretation, that frustration stayed with her and later hardened into resentment toward the whole institution. The bullying investigation makes the story even darker. In 2021, the palace launched a review into allegations about Meghan's treatment of staff. The full findings were never made public, but Bower claims to have seen fragments and witness summaries tied to that process. The picture he paints is rough. Staff are described as anxious, tearful, and worn down by relentless pressure, sharp corrections, and early morning emails. That image matters because it cuts directly against the public persona Meghan worked so hard to build. And that contrast is where the damage really bites. Publicly, Meghan presented herself as a voice for kindness, compassion, and empathy. But in this version of events, some staff described something very different behind closed doors. Bauer argues that this gap between the public message and the private allegations is exactly what makes the backlash so dangerous for her. Once the kindness image starts cracking, the humanitarian brand starts cracking too. According to this account, the palace is no longer rushing to defend itself in public either. Instead, under King William, it is described as taking a colder, quieter, more strategic posture. They are not reacting to every headline. They are documenting, archiving, and waiting. Bauer claims there is a private counter-dossier built from logs, emails, dates, and internal records from 2018 to 2020. Whether that full file ever appears or not, the very idea of it hangs over Meghan like a threat her team cannot easily brush aside. That is why this alleged file is presented as such a nightmare. Rumours can be denied, motives can be challenged, but records are much harder to explain away if they ever surface in full. In Bauer's framing, Meghan fears anything that could turn criticism into a documented pattern. If that happened, he suggests the blow to her public image would be severe, especially because her brand still leans so heavily on purpose, compassion, and credibility. The wedding itself becomes symbolic all over again in this final stretch. That £32 million event, once presented as a bright royal moment, is framed here as the point where Meghan gained global attention and later turned against the very platform that elevated her. By later describing it as a spectacle, she did not just criticise palace culture. To critics, she insulted the public feeling around that day too. That is why the warmth she once received in Britain is described here as having turned cold. From there, the story ties image damage directly to money and status. If Britain no longer sees Meghan as an asset, and if Hollywood sees controversy without reliability, then new opportunities become harder to land. This is where the story stops being only about reputation and becomes about survival. It suggests Meghan is now fighting for relevance, leverage, and a future that still looks powerful in a world growing more skeptical of her brand. That is why the billionaire theory keeps coming back in Bauer's version. He suggests Meghan may be networking in powerful California circles, looking for someone with deeper pockets, wider influence, and stronger reach than Harry can now provide. In this telling, it is not about romance, it is about positioning. The pattern he pushes is ruthless. Relationships stay useful while they still open doors, and once they stop doing that, the next move begins. That makes Harry's place in the story especially bleak. Bauer argues that Harry was never the final destination, but the bridge. He was the royal connection, the access point, the passport into a much bigger world. But now that the royal link has weakened and the Hollywood dream has not fully delivered, Harry's value in that structure appears, in this account, to be fading. He is left with less influence, less status, and no secure place in either world. At the same time, the monarchy in this version looks calm and steady by comparison. The palace has settled into a rhythm of duty, service, and continuity, and that stability becomes its strongest answer. They do not need to scream back. They do not need to chase every accusation. They just keep going and let the contrast speak for itself. By refusing to keep Meghan at the centre of the story, they make the Sussex drama look smaller with every passing month. So by the end of March 2026, the tally in Bauer's version is harsh and simple. Fewer deals, weaker status, no real access to the king, no leverage over the palace, and a public image under deeper pressure than ever. Between the Archbishop's correction, Bauer's reporting, media scrutiny, and palace silence, the old Meghan narrative is framed here as collapsing under its own weight. The fairy tale looks finished, the shine is fading, and the spectacle is almost out of road. Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for the next Royal Deep Dive.